Hello, in this video I am going to talk about the history of blockchain and Bitcoin. I was thinking about doing a lesson just on the history of blockchain, but the history of blockchain and Bitcoin is so intertwined you can't ignore one without the other. So I thought I'll combine the two lessons together. So I think one of the most crucial things to mention is the 2007-2008 financial crisis, also referred to as the 2008 financial crisis, but ultimately it actually began before 2007, but really what happened began in 2007. So I will create a separate video covering the 2007-2008 financial crisis in more depth, so stay tuned for that. But in 2007, a individual or group we do not know yet called Satoshi Nakamoto began working on the concept of Bitcoin and blockchain, eventually what became these technologies. So this is 2007. Satoshi Nakamoto began conceptualizing a new system. It was ultimately due to what happened in 2007 and 2008. This is what led Satoshi Nakamoto or the group. Again, we do not know if Satoshi Nakamoto is a person, if it is a group of people, if the person is even still alive, where he lives, if it's a he, if it's a she. We do not know this information. There are speculations of who he or she or the group may be, but we do not have hard evidence. Then in 2008, the domain bitcoin.org was registered. So this was beginning to solidify the blockchain and the Bitcoin legacy. This is in August, because there's another key event that happens in 2008, and that is in October, a Bitcoin white paper is published, which essentially is research and ideas of how Bitcoin and blockchain, and more importantly a decentralized distributed system, works. It's free to view. If you just Google Bitcoin white paper, I would definitely recommend checking it out. It's quite a big read, but it's very interesting, very fascinating, and it shows you the insight of Satoshi Nakamoto, again, whether it's an individual or a group of people. Then in 2009, in December of 2009, the first Bitcoin transaction occurs. So it was first conceptualized in 2007, and it took 2 years for the first transaction to occur using Bitcoin and using blockchain. Something I think that is definitely worth mentioning is the cypherpunks of the 1990s, because a lot of the technology and the ideas and the philosophy that went into Bitcoin and blockchain ultimately came from the individuals of the cypherpunk movement in the 1990s. I'll cover that in a separate video as well. This is a very interesting topic, and the whole idea of a decentralized system has been around for over 100 years. So again, it's not a wholly new concept, but it's the first time it was implemented very well, or as it will be very soon as we step through the history. So in May of 2010, the first real world transaction occurs, and this is for just wait for this, it is for 10,000 bitcoins. 10,000 bitcoins. I know, if you know the value of bitcoins, you know that's a lot. 10,000 bitcoins, and it was for a pizza. So a pizza, I'm going to just draw a nice little pizza here. I wouldn't mind having a pizza. This is just cheese or any other toppings you want it to be. Hopefully they didn't transact it for this pizza, because this isn't a very good looking pizza. And if you know the value of Bitcoin, then you know that's a lot. As of today, Bitcoin went to its all-time high of $5,200. So if we just do a simple calculation, 10,000 multiplied by 5,200, we get $52 million. So a pizza was bought with $52 million worth of today's Bitcoin. I hope that individual still has those Bitcoins. And then later in 2010, in July 2010, the exchange Mt. Gox is established, which is no longer around now, because I've already covered this in a separate video, why it went down and ultimately what happened to it. This is established as an exchange. At its height, it was dealing with over 70% of the bitcoins, and that is a crazy amount. Then in February of 2011, Bitcoin reaches parity with the US dollar, and this was a big moment because people started taking it seriously then. And then in June of 2012, block 181919 again, so 181919 is the largest block at this time. Sorry about that. Is the largest block with 1,322 transactions. That is a huge block. So that's just one single block with 1,322 individual transactions, which is just a crazy number from 2007, when it was nothing more than just an idea, to 2008, the domain name being registered and the first transaction, then the mega pizza transaction. I think that's what it should be called, the mega pizza transaction. 1,322 just in a single block, not in total, in a block. That is insane. And then we're not too sure, but roughly in 2011 and 2012, somewhere round about there is fraud and illicit behavior, and this is when it really gains momentum. So fraud and illicit behavior helps Bitcoin gain. And you might be thinking, what exactly is this BTC? This is just short for Bitcoin. This is almost how, on stocks you have ticker symbols. This is the equivalent of that. So Bitcoin gains momentum. Silk Road opens, and we're not talking about the old Chinese Silk Road or the Silk routes. This is a online website on the dark web, and this transacts in a bunch of different stuff, from drugs to weapons and a whole heap of other just crazy stuff. If you want to know more information about Silk Road, feel free to Google it. There's a lot of information about it, and it's definitely worth a read. Silk Road can be argued as one of the most influential parts of making Bitcoin succeed, because it allowed an anonymous currency to be used on the dark web for illicit behavior. And then also around about the same time, Mount Gox is hacked, which is not very good, and shut down for 7 days. Then the governments warn of terrorist financing and FBI leak reported, I believe. So they are scared that an anonymous currency will lead to terrorist funding, and that is a valid concern because ultimately it helped facilitate this. But one thing I do want to briefly mention about Silk Road, though it did deal in illicit goods and services, it actually reduced crime rate, because no longer were the days where you had to go into a dark alleyway and get some drugs from some criminal, and you might end up getting stabbed or shot or robbed or anything like that. It was over the net, so it's a lot safer. Again, I'm not excusing their behavior, but if you ask law enforcement that have an impartial mind, they said that it actually had a positive impact. But again, it is a bit more complex than that, so it's not quite as clear cut as saying it was bad or good. And then in June 2012 again, so 2012 is a very big year. In June of 2012, Coinbase is launched, and that's a Bitcoin wallet in San Francisco, and this is one of the most popular wallets used today. And if you're interested in dealing in cryptocurrency, especially Bitcoin, definitely recommend checking out Coinbase, an immensely popular one. Then in May of 2013, the first Bitcoin ATM, so yeah, the first automated teller machine debuted in San Diego. So the first ATM. So it's really picking off now, Bitcoin is, and people are taking it serious. They are wanting Bitcoin in the conventional fiat currency method. So ATM, for example, having means that they can access it easily via websites and eventually apps as well. So things are really picking off now. In August of 2013, the New York State Department of Financial Services, they issue subpoenas to 22 Bitcoin companies. This is obviously not good for the Bitcoin market. I can tell you it has recovered since then. It's had several hits, but it has always recovered so far. A lot of the time, the government are afraid, big conventional banks are afraid of new technology. They spoke about the internet, about the industrial revolution in a very similar way they are speaking about Bitcoin and ultimately blockchain, because that's when they say Bitcoin and they're talking about it in a negative way, a lot of the time they're talking about the underlying decentralized distributed technology. And then in November, actually I did just miss out one little thing. One little thing occurs over here. It's quite a big one. And this is of May 2013. Coinbase raises $5 million in venture funding. If you're interested who funded them, it was Union Square Ventures, a really big venture fund. Almost forgot about mentioning that. That's very important. Then in 2013, November 2013, that is, Bitcoin reaches over $1,000. So if we remember, those 10,000 Bitcoins now would be worth $10 million. In 2013, they're worth a lot more now. So Bitcoin reaches over $1,000, and this is after the market perceives the US Senate hearings were positive. So the hearings were good, and Bitcoin skyrocketed, which is fantastic for Bitcoin fans. Then in 2014, February 2014, attacks occur on exchanges, and it ultimately led to the collapse of Mount Gox. So this collapsed, and as a result, the Bitcoin price plummets immensely. But again, don't worry, it's a happy ending. It comes back. And then in September of 2014, PayPal, I think you've heard of PayPal, they announced Bitcoin integration. So not only could you use it on the dark web or using some other services that aren't very mainstream, you can now use it on an immensely mainstream application such as PayPal, which is obviously really helping solidify the legitimacy and ultimately the legacy of Bitcoin and blockchain. So ever since then, there's obviously been a lot of other development occurring, but this overall covers the history and what has been occurring since 2007 with the financial crisis and Satoshi Nakamoto just conceptualizing an amazing decentralized distributed network to it actually being a reality. I know this has been a very long video, but there was a lot to cover. Hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. Feel free to go through the video again and just having a look at the history of it because it's an amazing story. And as usual, thank you for watching and I hope to see you in my next lesson.